Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all are doing well. In today's video, we're going to continue with the flooring of the dollhouse. Now in the last video, I showed you my process for laying down the hardwood, and I've actually finished all of the hardwood for the first floor, so I'll show you that in a second. But today we're going to move into the kitchen. And for the kitchen, what I really wanted was some ceramic tile. Now, I love ceramic tile. I actually have it in my kitchen here in my real house. And so I really wanted to try and duplicate that look for the dollhouse kitchen. Finding the flooring that I liked proved to be quite a challenge. I looked at a lot of the prefab miniature flooring that you can buy, and I just didn't find anything that I liked or that I thought looked like ceramic tile. So then I started looking for actual miniature tile. Wasn't necessarily going to be ceramic, but maybe something that I could make look like ceramic. And I'm telling you, the cost of that for the size of flooring that I have to do was just outrageous. And so that option very quickly went off the table. And so the only option left to me was to make my own. Now, this is one of those projects that had I known how much work it was going to be, I might have rethought my process. However, I was determined to get the ceramic tile look for this floor. And at the end of the day, when it was all said and done, it was well worth all of the effort that went into making the floor. So I hope you stick around for the process, and let's get started. Making the tiles was an easy process, but it was very time consuming. So I started with this shelf liner that I bought off of Amazon. And I know it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but all these areas that look like they're gray are actually kind of a sagey green color, which is perfect for the kitchen. I needed to add that shelf liner onto something that was as thick as the coffee stir sticks that I used for the hardwood floor for the rest of the house, because you want your floor to be level. So this is a medium weight chipboard. It's 1.27 millimeters thick, which is almost exactly the same width as those coffee stir sticks are. Now these particular sheets are 8.5 by 11, which is the same size as a piece of regular copy paper, and I got 50 in a package. However, you can buy smaller packages with less pieces, and you can buy them in a variety of different sizes. So the first step was to cut out a piece of shelf liner that was the same size as my piece of chipboard. Now the shelf liner has an adhesive backing, so it was easy to just peel that back and attach it to the chipboard. I found this octagon template on Google Images, and it was simple to just copy it into a Word document, size it, and then print off a bunch of copies. So on the opposite side from the shelf liner, I'm going to attach this template using two-sided tape. Then I had to cut out all of these octagon pieces and cut away all of the black that you see from the pattern, because that's where the grout was going to be. This was certainly a time-consuming process because I think I cut out 7 or 8 of these sheets to get enough tiles for the floor. I also needed to make sure that I cut out some of these edge pieces, because on the floor itself, of course, there was going to be edges that didn't have a full piece of tile in it. When I was finally finished, I had this whole basket of ceramic tiles to work with. In order to lay those tiles down evenly, I printed out a whole bunch more copies of this template and built myself a very large template that was big enough to cover the kitchen floor. I just taped pieces together until I had it large enough to fit all the way across. Then I brought back the original template that I made, which is the same shape as the actual kitchen floor. I taped the floor plan down to the template, making sure that all of the tiles were straight and even, and then I just cut away all of the excess. I was left with a new template made out of the octagon shapes that's the same size and shape as the kitchen floor. After a quick dry fit to make sure that it fit properly, I was ready to start layering down the floor. Now I used two-sided tape for this whole process because if you think wood swells and warps with wet glue, you should see what it does to chipboard. And it took me days to cut out all of those tiles, and I was not going to risk this floor not being even when I was done. So I laid down across the entire floor a whole section of the two-sided tape. Once I had it fully covered in the two-sided tape, I started by taking a very small piece away in the upper right corner. I would not advise taking all of the tape off and trying to lay your template down all in one shot, because once it sticks to that two-sided tape, you're not going to be able to pull it back up. So by taking a very small piece of tape off of one side, laying down your floor so that it's straight and even, pressing the floor down into that space where you've taken off the cover. Then once you've done that, you can go back in and start removing the rest of the tape and smoothing out the floor. Then I covered that whole section again with more two-sided tape. It took a little bit of piecemealing in some areas to get around some of these angles, and I did eventually do the pantry as well. And then I had to also cut away anything excess in around where the bay window was going to be, and of course up and down the sides. I was finally ready to start laying down these tiles, and so I just removed small sections of the tape backing at a time to keep my workspace relatively small. And you can see once the backing is removed that the template itself is still very visible, and that's going to be my guide to where I lay down the tiles. I started laying the tiles down one at a time, making sure that I was staying inside of that black border from the template. It took me the better part of 2 evenings to get all of that tile laid down, but once it was done, it was time to add some grout. So I'm just using this drywall spackling. This is that same stuff that I use all the time. It starts out pink and dries white, but I didn't want white grout. I wanted to have kind of that mossy green color in my grout. So I ended up just adding acrylic paint to the spackling itself and made my own. Getting the color right was going to be a little bit tricky because of course the spackling is still pink, and the color that it is once it's mixed when it's wet is not going to be the same color it is once it's dry. So I really had to go on faith that once the spackling dried it was going to be the right shade. Now I ended up mixing way more than I needed for this project, but I had this fear of not making enough and then trying to color match if I had to make a second batch. Then using a small spatula, I just started working that grout in between the tiles. I went over each area a couple of times to make sure that that grout was going all the way down to the bottom. And then I scraped away as much of the excess as I could that was on top of the tile. I let the grout dry overnight, and the next day I took a piece of shop towel that was just slightly damp, and I went over each individual tile to remove any grout that was stuck to the top of the tile. There were so many times during this process where I was wondering if all of this work was going to be worth it, but now that it's done, I am so happy with how it turned out. I hope you like it as much as I do. Thanks very much for joining me on this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.